What's going on, everybody? I almost left my microphone muted. Welcome to the Paranormal Council, and we have a great show for you guys lined up tonight. We're going to be talking about the good subject of reincarnation. This is controversial to some, and to some, there's a lot of people that want to know about it and different standpoints. So, representative here on the council, we have a variety of us are from different backgrounds, so this should be interesting to talk about. We're going to give you our theories and personal takes, as with every show. So, if you want to hear a variety of perspectives and actually learn and get down into the subject matter, then you're going to want to subscribe and share with your friends this podcast, the Paranormal Council. Again, please subscribe, guys. It's going to help us out. And click that like button. All right, so let's get started. Guys, reincarnation. I am super excited to be talking about this one. Certainly, this has been a subject of many people. I think in general, many people wonder what happens when you die, right? And of course, there's a percentage of people that's going to say, okay, well, we come back. You know, they're going to believe in that reincarnation trail. Then some people think, maybe a Christian sense you're going to go to heaven, or a version of heaven, or maybe you're not going to do anything. There's all kinds of theories on what happens when you die. So I think we should preface that. But reincarnation, that's, there's a lot of people out there. There's been some studies done, and we're going to get into all that. So any initial thoughts? Anybody want to jump in there and their initial thoughts on reincarnation? Not all at once.
Start off with Sean, I think, would be great.
Well, this when you put the topic on the phone, I kind of had to chuckle because I actually will have been spending quite a bit of time in this subject matter. I have dealt with it many different times, and so obviously I'm a Christian. I don't follow the traditions. I know at least 4 different types of reincarnation traditions are out there. I've worked with several that come from the background of the paganism, Wicca kind of background, where Hecate is at the crossroads and helps you decide whether you're going backwards or forwards, or in those kinds of ideas. But the Bible really is, coming from a Christian point of view. I'm just going to give the Christian point of view right off the bat, and then y'all can kind of go from there. But the idea of, there's a lot of people that try to claim reincarnation. John the Baptist, they're taking a lot of those scriptures out of context. And so the Christian idea, the Orthodox Christian idea, is the resurrection. Hebrews 9 tells us that, to die once and then face judgment. The idea, Jesus talks about being reborn, but he's not talking about reincarnation there. He's talking about the idea of being born spiritually, what we talk about from being separated from God and being born into the kingdom of God. And that takes a process of sorts, but that's not talking about, death and life and rebirth. For the Christian and the deep Hebrew, it's all about resurrection. If you were to go back in the first temple, and talk to the Jewish people, and they say, what's the 2 most important things about your belief system? They'd say one God and resurrection. And so resurrection for like found in the book of Job. Book of Job says, Job says, I know one day I will stand in my flesh. And again, for that person, he's going to be himself. He's not the same flesh. He's going to be himself. He doesn't lose he doesn't lose his individuality, and he's going to see his God again in the flesh. And so that's kind of the nutshell of the Christian view. The Christian view is resurrection unto life, immortality, not a circle of life, so to speak. And so I'm just kind of going to leave it there. And, there's a lot of questions a lot of people have. I know you're going to bring up some things. There's a lot of different things I can talk about why people have past life memories. There's a lot of things that we can talk about with that I think could push back on some of the reincarnation, but that might be for another show. But there you go, Josh. That's mine.
No, I'm actually glad you brought that up. I think I think what I'm going to talk about when I get into some deep dive stuff here is going to actually hit on what you just brought up. Actually, so uh, I'm um, I'm going to get into some of that too and see what you think. You might be like, yeah, Josh, I can't follow you on this one. Or you might say, hey, maybe you're onto something. Could be plausible. I like to think it's plausible because again, it's just theory, right? In any case, though, Stacy, Jen,
Mm.
what are your thoughts?
Well, I come from really old school, the theology on that. The the modern take of what the old Egyptian Book of the Dead type stuff is found in Spiritism, and Spiritism was very popular at the end of the 19th century, not 1900s, 19th century, the 1800s, where they did a lot of the table tipping seances and knocking and all of that, um, the parlor seances. But the Spiritism that you find in, say, the Book of Mediums, shows that the reincarnation takes place only when the life mission that you were sent here to actually fulfill, it goes unfulfilled, and it's a choice that you make. It's not something that as soon as you die you suddenly pop out another vajayjay. You actually go to the other side, see your life, um, what you did and what you were supposed to do that you did not actually do, and you have the choice. Do you want to go back and actually finish that, or do you want to stay here at this particular spiritual plane and just live out eternity here? And that choice is really, the where the judgment comes through. You make the judgment yourself, whether or not you are worthy of staying where you're at, or whether you need to come back and actually fulfill your mission. That's Spiritism in a nutshell. Um, and the spirits that decided to stay on the plane that they were on are not that far different from ours, which allows them to easily communicate with people here with physical objects, like the wrapping of the table, or the table tipping, and a lot of the physical stuff that the spirits are able to influence, is because they're just out of phase from where we're at. They didn't decide to come back. They stayed where they were at, and that's the plane that they're on. um, Essentially, that's how reincarnation works in Spiritism and in a lot of the Latin American, uh, you know Afrocentric cultures, the diaspora, essentially.
Okay, Jen, you want to weigh in on your initial
Well,
thoughts, or
I mean, I know you guys have a lot of, we've talked about it a lot. And so I know you guys have kind of the topic covered. So I'm going to come at it from a different angle just to throw a corkscrew in it.
Mhm.
I'm going to talk about the personal side of the conversation of reincarnation, right? I'm going to share some personal stuff about me that I don't share with many people. I have two girls, um, and they are 15 months apart in age. What most people don't know is that I actually had a miscarriage before my oldest daughter and one between the two of them. So in 24 months, I had four pregnancies, two full term, and two that were 12 weeks. So having gone through that, right, I was approached by a number of people who have heard that part of my story. And I can't tell you how many of them, especially spiritualists, who have tried to convince me that my two that passed were actually reincarnated in my daughters. And I have a very different feel on that because, I was their mother and they lived with me. And I have my other side too, my spiritual side. I firmly believe that they were not reincarnated. They were individuals with individual personalities, spirits, all those things. But that doesn't mean that something like reincarnation isn't possible. Um, and I know, a lot of spiritualism and spiritualists try to help people by, saying, hey, don't worry, your passed on children are back with you and trying to help you feel better. And, that's not always the most helpful approach. Because I know where my kids are, and I'm good with that. I'm okay with that. I'm at peace, they're at peace. I don't need any more answers than that. I don't need another explanation of that, So anyway, there's a personal side to this conversation as well that affects everybody on some level. They know somebody or they experienced it themselves, whatever. So, taking that forward in the conversation.
Okay. No, I mean that's good, and and it's funny too because there is a lot of odds that, like, there's even some common talk that is not directly about like reincarnation, so to speak. I mean, it kind of is almost directly, but a lot of times you'll find it in conversations like when you hear parents talking about kids and they say, I don't know where he learned to swim like that. I mean, his parents were not swimmers, things like that. Or they say, like, hey, I don't know where he learned to play that piano, or things like that. Like, he must have been a pianist in the past life or something. A lot of people say these things. These are terms you hear all the time. Man, you must have been whatever in a past life, right? So we do. It is a very much thing that is in the zeitgeist out there. Like, everybody talks about it here and there. It's something that people kind of know, but again, whether or not their beliefs get there or not. Now, when I set out to, I didn't want to like solve all the mysteries, but when I set out to write my, or actually before I wrote my book, the reason why I wrote my book is because I had a lot of ideas. I had, when you go out and you work in the field for many, many years, you start seeing pattern recognition. And so and I usually always say that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. And that's just because, again, pattern recognition, that's usually where that truth is, right? So you start seeing the same kind of things over and over. You start seeing the same type of hauntings or communication. You just see some of the same things over and over and over. So you kind of have to start saying, okay, well, after so many years of seeing these certain things, there must be some truth to these things. And I still don't know the rules. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. Like, we don't know, right? But one of the last pieces of the puzzle that kind of was irritating me was reincarnation, because it was such a popular subject. And at that time, I had fallen away from my Christian roots, so to speak. And I had really just was like, whatever. And so I had watched a TV show, and there was a particular case. It was about these kids, and a lot of it revolved around some of the cases from Dr. Jim Tucker from the University of Virginia, who just recently retired, actually, in 2025. And he's documented over like 2,500 cases of children with past lives, memories, and he kind of would rate them. He would like see what credibility, and there was some pretty strong ones. I mean, like, this one kid knew like 55 facts of some past life that this guy was very private, and his family confirmed. But this was like, there's no way that this kid would have known these 55 facts, because it's not like this guy was on the internet, and this was like before the true age of the internet hit. This guy didn't have all these details out there. It was very bizarre. So, I mean, there's like super strong cases like that, and all those things. Well, there was a case in particular that struck me as kind of odd, and this kid just kept saying, "Oh, he knew all these details." And I'm not going to get too deep into that, but ultimately they actually went there while the kid was still in age, because a lot of these happens in the ages of like 2 to 5 is when most of these past live memories occur. That's not the age range. They can happen after that, but again, on average, 2 to 5 years old. So this kid's like around like 6 years old. They take him to this place and they end up tracking down like some of his memories checked out. But in the end, the place where he was supposed to be from, the family was all alive. there was no like these memories that he had and all these things. This family was still alive. Yeah, they used to live there, and like I said, there was some pretty cool things that lined up, and it really stumped me and it got me to thinking. And then one day it kind of hit me, and I was like, well, wait a minute. What if this child is having memories, but what if the memories was from a ghost? Okay. So what if he was thinking that he was playing with those other kids on the beach, or the neighbor's dog, the white and black dog that he talked about, or the beach, or the seaplanes coming in, all the memories of that area and that home, but he wasn't actually there. Okay. Because the child's not going to probably distinguish that. He's going to, think that he really was there and maybe he was a ghost. So that led me down other rabbit holes and other thinking and other research. And again, I never set out to I never sat there and said, okay, I'm a Christian, and because I'm a Christian, everything that I do is I got to fit it into this narrative.
Right.
I'm not like that. I try to be open-minded. Okay, I still have my faith, but I try to be open-minded, and I say, okay, but as things would have it, I said, and I actually turned to the Bible, and I said, you know what? I'm going to read the Bible again. I haven't read it in like years. And I got away from it. I said, I'm going to read it because I'm an adult now. I'm older. I've done a lot of paranormal research, and I'm going to read it. So I did. And I was like blown away. I was like, oh my God, there's so many things that line up with my experiences. Like, holy crap. And so some of the answers that I seek now, so I'm going to get into my theory. That way we can open up even more. So I'm going to have the mic for a little bit. So sorry, guys. But you guys will be able to talk about all this afterwards. And if you want to tear me down, that's fine. So in general, we are made up of really three major things, right? Flesh, spirit, body, and soul. Okay. Now, our soul pretty much wears our spirit body, and it's nothing can separate spirit and soul other than the Word of God. Okay, God can only do that. That's part of the judgment process. Is God can actually tear apart the spirit body and the soul, and that's where judgment, because there's true character in the soul. So I just wanted to establish that. Now, I personally am under the belief that we are all unique in each life. We have one soul. Okay, God created us individually as a soul, as that individual that's destined for this life. Okay. Now, my theory is that the spirit bodies are what is recycled. Okay. And that when the spirit bodies and the soul are separated, there's an imprint of who we are on that spirit body as well. And those spirit bodies get reused by God in other souls. And it's those imprints, of course, that last until we're about 5 or 6 years old, and things that come along with that spirit body and connect us to the past and parts of humanity. Now, why do I think that? Because one, again, I agree. I think that souls, we're unique, but also the spirit body. Okay, now it's true. The Bible does not talk about what it does with our earth spirit bodies. It does talk about we get new ones. Okay, and Sean should well, he would know this for sure. But let me read from the good book here for a second. So bear with me. I'm actually going to read from the good book, My Paranormal, a Guide from the Spirit Realms. All right. Sean's like, you blasphemy, motherfucker. So, just kidding. Okay. So this is the first thing I wanted to kind of point out, and maybe Sean can help me clarify too. Well, but this is actually what talks about God is the one that can separate spirit, body, and soul. This is Hebrew 4:12. It says, "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and of spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart." Okay, I just bring that up because again, it's really referring to that being able to God is the one that can divide those things. Okay, nobody else can do that. Okay, and now I'm going to read a little bit more, guys. So just bear with me and just enjoy. Okay, enjoy this. And just for reference, this is going to be some Corinthians. Okay, so. This is Corinthians, in fact, Corinthians 5:1-5, and Corinthians 6:1-10. For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is when we die and leave this earthly body, we will have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God himself and not by human hands. Okay. We grow weary in our present bodies, as long as to put our heavenly bodies like new clothing. For we will put on heavenly bodies. We will not be spirits without bodies. All right. We will live in these earthly bodies. We groan and sigh. It's not that we want to die and get rid of these bodies that clothe us. Rather, we want to put on our new bodies so that these dying bodies will be swallowed up by life. God himself has prepared us for this. And as a guarantee, he has given us Holy Spirit. So we are always confident, even though we know that as long as we live in these bodies, we are not at home with the Lord. For we live by believing and not by seeing. Yes, we are fully confident, and we would rather be away from these earthly bodies, for then we will be at home with the Lord. So whether we are home, we are here in his body or away from his body, our goal is to please him, for we must all stand before Christ to be judged. We will each receive whatever we deserve from the good or evil we have done in this earthly body. All right. I know it was a lot, but obviously, I wanted to talk about the process of receiving that new earthly body or that new heavenly body. And that's what happens when you go up to be judged, right? And again, Sean can correct me if I'm wrong, but God divides our spirit, body, and soul to make judgment. Okay, because again, like he separates it. Okay, he can clearly see your soul laid out before you. There you go. And of course, when you enter upon heaven, you're going to get a new heavenly body. Okay, and like in the Corinthians, the soul needs that body. It needs a spirit body. Okay, whether it's earthly. Now, the earthly one, this is what connects us to earth while we're here on earth. So once we go up there and we shed that old raggedy, bruised up, dirty, spirit body, and we get our heavenly one, it's my belief, though, and this is just my theory now, this is where God will reuse those spirit bodies for other souls on earth. And this is, and sometimes I know it doesn't say it in the Bible, but the Bible doesn't always tell you exactly how God does every single thing. It's not telling you the process of everything he does. Okay. So I just believe in my heart that he's reusing these. This is why we have imprints. This is why, we have these things from past lives that follow us. Now, there are some people that are new souls, what they call new souls, because as populations increase, and things like that, there's not always enough possibly, spirit bodies to go around. Not to mention, God probably doesn't reuse all spirit bodies because some of these spirit bodies are tainted with evil. Like some of these people aren't going to go to heaven. These aren't very good spirit bodies to reuse. But by reusing these spirit bodies, this is also re-injecting that mankind, it's like inheriting things to where we're not always just starting fresh, always starting new, that there is this past that is carrying forward within all of us all the time. And I think God injects that back into life in general. So this is just some of the things that I've researched and, looked at how it would be possible to have reincarnation, but yet still to me makes sense, because I've never followed the soul reincarnation thing. I'm not a big fan of that. I believe in that one soul, but I do think that we're connected, and I think God connects us in those ways too. And that's why I think there was certain things that connect me to the past. I've had experiences with past memories and from past lives, and I cherish those things because it connects me back to the souls that were before me, and that the because that spirit body is a part of me. It may not have been my soul, but it was my spirit body, like in different bodies, different, going through different lives. And so it's just a different way of looking at the other half of, instead of soul reincarnation, I believe it's more of a spirit body reincarnation. And and so that's been kind of my take. So I wanted to kind of read that and share with you guys. So now you guys can have at it.
I have a question, because I want to try to put it in terms that, like, not so intelligent people on the subject can understand. Just, me. So what you're basically, to sum it up, what you're saying is the body, the human is comprised of the three parts: body, soul, and spirit, right? And biblically speaking, it's all going to kind of be reused, right? So the soul is going to get a new body in heaven and have a whole different path at that point in heaven. You're saying that the soul, or the spirit, which is like our psychology, right, and our understanding of spirituality and the earthly side of it, right, that's what connects us, for our soul, to our body, right? That will be returned to the dirt, like ashes to ashes. And then the spirit body can then be reused, or like the psychology of it, which essentially is like evolution, right? Handing down generational knowledge, handing down experiences, things like that, but in a different way. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up.
Okay.
If I'm catching everything, and I'm not, like, if you're wording everything right, I believe so. But yeah, like, and I mean, the flesh part, I would assume is kind of that, like, goes back to earth, and is really just flesh decaying at that point, unless there's something that our physical flesh is bound for later, with some kind of actual weird zombie thriller resurrection thing going on with that. I don't know, but
well, I mean, essentially it's keeping his creation continuing, right? It's feeding the earth,
right. It's and again, to me it makes sense. It would account for a lot of things and still fall in line with all the experiences I've had doing this. But again, this is truly based on, the theory itself is ultimately based on sort of the Christian take. But I didn't set out to do that. I didn't say, okay, well, let me just jump through hoops to like make that fit. It just, when I was reading the Bible and I came across all those different things, those different passages, it was like, I mean, it's plausible. Like, it's plausible that God reuses the spirit bodies, and everything else would be fine. Like all the soul and getting the new heavenly, the judgment, all the regular process still stands. It's just the spirit bodies, and it would make sense that God would reuse them to, like you said, Jen, I guess, like, to evolve humanity or continue that evolution of humanity. So,
Well, what you're saying isn't really that far removed from what the ancient Egyptians believed in the Book of the Dead. You had four parts. You had your mind, body, soul, and ghost. The Sa, Ba, Ta, and Ta. It was four parts. The mind, body, pretty much perished with you on this earth. The mind imprinted at the same time the memories and experiences upon the ghost and the soul. Now, the ghost was something that left the body up to 3 days before actual death. And there's actual a lot of urban legends that support that. Even when people start talking about doppelgangers, they're looking in the mirror and all of a sudden they see themselves standing behind themselves in the mirror, and it's usually an omen that they've got about 3 days left. It's a really spooky thing that Germans tell their children, never stare at yourself in the mirror too long because you might see your doppelganger. Anyway, the whole idea is that your body itself has a spirit, and that ghost is what fears death more than anything. And it is what keeps you alive at this point. Everybody is afraid of dying until that ghost actually leaves because it knows death is coming. Suddenly people become at peace. You see this in hospice all the time. They're like, my time is coming. I know my time is coming and I'm welcoming it. It's going to be great. They suddenly have this, they no longer fear death because that part of their organism, the doppelganger, the ghost, has left. And now all that's really left to leave is the soul. So that's not very far from what you were saying and what the Egyptians actually believed too. The whole judgment thing, the soul goes to the other side. They in hieroglyphs, you see it all over the place. The whole with the scales, they have to weigh their heart against a feather, and the word for truth in ancient hieroglyph is a feather. So the truth of who they are is weighed against their heart, and if their heart falls below the feather, that means they have a lot of guilt and a lot of sins essentially, and they're quickly devoured by this crocodile-like creature because, well, they were a bad person. But if they were a good person, they move on and go to heaven at that point.
Nice. I see. I always had a hard time with soul reincarnation because, like, I keep always thinking about a lot of times whether it's a choice or whether you're forced to go back, however you want to look at the rules. My problem is that you don't have memories of that. Like, it's to me it's a dumb system. Like, to me it's like, okay, you're gonna go back, but you got to learn a lesson. But oh wait, you're not going to remember what the hell you did wrong. You're gonna have to just figure it out. And you know what? If you don't, too bad. You just have to keep recycling until you do. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of that.
You're only that's only half of the process. When you go back, you actually choose the life that you live. It's not you suddenly go to some rando, and being reborn. The life that you're going to live based off of that whole trajectory. And to be perfectly honest, your past lives do not necessarily mean in history. It just means the life you lived before this one. Your past life could actually be 200 years in the future from this point. Time does not make a difference on this. You can be past lives back in ancient Egypt, or you could be, way in the future. Our future is your past life. It's not linear. It is literally anything in the timeline. So where you're at in your evolution, it's like the end game. You go back in the end game, suddenly becomes your future, and you're jumping back and forth. It's a lot like that.
Right.
I don't
know. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. And then, like, I don't know who the hell would choose some of these lives. But I mean, look, maybe I can't say no. I mean, you could be right. I could be wrong. Who knows? I just don't feel.
Well, given the number of people out there, think of all the assholes that have lived throughout history, really, and then they had to actually develop over time. We still have assholes today, but they're not as bad as the assholes in history. For all the things that people used to do during the Dark Ages and the medieval ages, and even way back, in the Mayans, where they were sacrificing babies and doing all kinds of stupid stuff, they had to evolve. They had to actually decide whether or not, I think I can do better. And over time, society has grown that way. It has become more progressive. I hate that word, but it has evolved in such a way that it is not as hedonistic as what it was.
Right. But you could also use that same argument for spirit body reincarnation, because even when Jen was kind of saying like that was being used as to evolve human, the human thing. So we could be learning those lessons through spirit body reincarnation, and evolving to where society is saying, no, you can't sacrifice dead babies. You can only abort them. Anyway,
Well, if what you're saying is true, right? If your theory is right, and so what happens to these spirit bodies if they're not used instantly? Did you not just crack the case of all paranormal then, because these spirit bodies are floating around and people are interacting with them residually and actively?
Well, no, because a lot of so all right, let me cover that ghost thing. So, like in the case of that kid that was experiencing memories through the ghost, I do think that ghosts are spirit bodies and souls still. They're waiting. Most of these are just spirits in transition. Some spirits are here longer than others. I once asked Sean, how long do you think a human spirit body could hang around before going up to the next step, basically to either be judged or whatever, like to go through the white light, if you want to say, right, go through the portal, right? And Sean, I still remember your answer. I don't know if you've changed it since we talked. You did seem, but he said about a week, about a week, and I disagreed because I said, well, and because in the afterlife, time is different, right? So, what 5 days to us could seem like 100 years to spirit, or vice versa, or 100 years for a spirit, like for us, could just be short drop in the bucket while waiting to move on to the next thing, which is probably another reason why we don't see a lot of cavemen ghosts and things like that, which Sean used to talk about too, because eventually, yes, some of these ghosts finally do move on, whether it's our time a day or 200 years our time. To them, it's time it's so small, because look at the big picture of God and the universe. Time is such a drop in the bucket. So, all right, assuming that I'm right, because I'm talking. So, let's say a ghost is hanging around for like 10 years in our time, right? Well, again, while he's here, I still believe that they are the spirit body and soul. Once that spirit body, once the ghost moves on, he crosses over, or God finally opens up the portal, says, okay, now it's your time, or whatever that is. Again, I know the rules. But once he goes to the next thing, right, that's when the spirit bodies are separated, and God uses those spirit bodies to nest the new souls of the new generations and stuff. So, does that answer that?
Man, there's so many things y'all just talked about. I'm going to push back on a few things. First of all, I'm going to say I don't think your theory is like totally off base, or you got your own theories. I would be very careful to kind of interject into the scripture that God reuses, because it's never talked about there.
Sure.
So I would be kind of like pushing the envelope there.
That's why I say it's my theory.
Yeah. And the other thing I would kind of push back on is, I think you're really kind of describing like what Stacy was talking about in a lot of different ways, just maybe removed a couple of steps and stuff there. I know in the occult theosophy, Bavowski used to teach that the etheric soul stayed back for a period of time and it dissipated over time. And that's kind of what, in a way, what you're talking about in a way, maybe. But you mentioned about me. There's a guy that wrote a book, a Christian guy, Chris Putnam from Durham, North Carolina. He's now passed away. But me and him used to do a lot of talk. He actually wrote a book about the paranormal from a Christian point of view. And we collaborated a lot. And he gives a story, and somebody can go on the internet and look it up. But it's called the Skibbish account, the Skibbish case. And the woman stayed back. The long story short, they had a crash, woman and a son. Woman died instantly. Police reports kept coming in that a woman was on the side of the road, naked, hollering at people. By the time the cops got there, couldn't find anything. They wrecked. About a week or so went by, and finally one of the detectives was driving up. He kept hearing these reports, so he went over and started looking over side the mountain and found them. The little boy was still alive. Talked about an old man coming back and feeding him and telling him to get underneath the car during the day and come out and rest at night in the car. And as soon as he was found, the woman figure dissipated, was never seen again in that area. I've not changed anything about that week or two. I wouldn't probably put it a week. I would probably say, I think there's certain issues that happen with people when they're dying. Maybe God allows them to stay back and to say their goodbyes, or to do something, or to, like in this case, to say, hey, my son's down here, protect him, get him. The Bible, I did a video, not to plug my channel, but I did a video not long ago on my channel talking about Luke chapter 16, where the rich man and poor man both go into the afterlife. One goes to the Abraham's bosom, which is now emptied and in heaven, and the other goes into the place of torment. And it's very interesting because I spend a lot of time talking about portals and dimensions with that particular show. But I bring that up to say this point. I think when we look at Luke 16, from my point of view, we see that there is a holding place. God has a plan in place to take people where they need to go, and based on their subject as far as their spirit, whether it's to be with him or to be in the place of judgment. And that's just the way I see it from Luke 16, verse 19, if you want to look at it. One other thing, the doppelganger, Stacy, that's a really, I've been studying and researching some of that subject. The doppelganger really goes back a long time, not just with the inside of Christianity. Christianity has some ideas of the twin motif. And if somebody wants to ever study that, they can go back and look up the twin idea in.
It goes back to ancient Egyptians. That's what I was saying. The ghost of the your body when you die. That's the doppelganger. It's right. It goes back thousands and thousands of years.
There's a really cool scripture, and I'm not going to go into it right now, but it talks about when we come to Christ and we're in Christ, we're seated in the heavenly places. So it's almost like a quantum entanglement. We're there with him, but also here. But one other thing I wanted to say real quick, and I'm going to turn it back over. I would be careful using the body again. And I just want to say this right here. As far as reusing the body, when Jesus was resurrected in 1 Corinthians 15 and 2 Corinthians 15, and I think 1 Corinthians 14, talks about how our bodies will actually be. We'll have flesh and blood, but flesh and bone, but no blood. That's very interesting. And we'll look like each other. But I would say that as a Christian, I would also say this: God has to reconstruct that body. And what I mean by that is because it will, for people, like I said, that's been dead for thousands of years, there's no bone left. More than likely, there's nothing left. He's going to reconstruct that body. And I just wanted to leave that there. But good. I like that. And I have to think on your
right. Well, and let me clarify too. So, okay, so first of all, yeah, with the body, like I don't know. Like, I mean, I know a ton of people doing cremations. Even the Catholic Church has gone and started supporting cremations and stuff. Some people believe in that take, like you were talking about, where it's like they want their body to be physically kept intact so that they can be reconstructed, so to speak, in that sense. But if you're there for thousands and thousands of years, I mean, it's still going to end up the same. God's going to reconstruct anyways. But keep in mind that, like, I'm not talking about a soul deterioration, anything like that. This is strictly just the spirit body itself, the spirit body that connects us to Earth being reused. That's really what it all just comes down to, right? And so it's the judgment process, the things that I still believe in that. I still think that's the exact same thing that the Bible talks about. It talks about the judgment process. All that stuff's the same. This is just theory on how we can connect that spirit body that discarded the spirit body that gets discarded for the new heavenly body. What does God do with those? This is speculation, of course, in theory. That's why this is a theory. But also,
the only thing, and again, I'm not pushing back and then saying you're absolutely wrong. When you go back and study the word soul and spirit, they're interchangeable in the Old Testament because they're the same. Also, if you look up the word soul, it's talking about throat because we breathe and eat through a throat. There's a lot more into that, but the ideas here is you're just a disembodied. When you die, you're disembodied spirit and soul, and that's kind of the ancient Hebrew idea. Now, There was some Kabbalah, like I said, some kind of the Kabbalah type that actually kind of did try to separate the soul and spirit out, but it's very difficult. And that's the only thing I would say. It's very difficult.
Right. But, and here's the thing, Sean, like, yes, maybe you're right. In Old Hebrew, maybe there was one, but we're talking in Corinthians, they even talk about a new heavenly spirit body.
Well, that new heavenly spirit body again is talking about the idea of that flesh and bone without the blood. And I understand what you're saying, and I'm not trying to push back too hard on that. I'm just saying, from the Orthodox point of view, the spirit and the soul are the same, and you can't separate them. And when it talks about that God can separate the spirit and the soul in and the body, what he's talking about is kind of like the same thing when he asked the guy, you're saving up all your money, but at the end of the day, you're not worried about the one who can take your soul. You're not worried about that. And that's kind of what the same idea is going there. But anyway, I'll kind of let you go on.
No, that's okay. I mean, I don't mind. Like I said, this is why we're here, to talk about these things, to work it out, to talk it out. And like I said, that it just, from my interpretation, it appears that we have that spirit body and that soul. And it seems to be, again, this is where that God talks about separating that, or God's word can separate those things for judgment. But again, this is just theory in the end. Regardless, this was just pure theory on how this could work if this was, let's say, Christian based, and how it could work for reincarnation and be plausible, that children have these past memories, because there is a bigger picture. So let me share a little story here. And Jen, I already had to get her permission for this, but let me share a little story as well. And this is something personal. And so when, sometimes things happen in life and you're not exactly sure. And sometimes it seems untrue, or like it's just too good to be true kind of thing or something. But when I met Jen, it was so weird. Like when I met Jen, it's like the first things that popped in my head was there's my wife. And I was like, what the hell?
Talk
Like,
about awkward.
yeah, it was like, but it was so weird because ever since day one, we have felt like we've been married. Like it's so weird. It's not been like I don't know, like in other relationships, where you maybe feel lust or you feel certain things, and but with us, it's been just this comfort, this love, this like deep, just like we're husband and wife. Well, to make things even crazier is, you know, um, so there's a couple particular memories. Let's just say, let's call them memories that have been very vivid and has gone through. And I've talked about these before. I've talked about them with Stacy in the past. And so I had a particular memory of me during the pioneer days. Okay. Again, so if going by my own theory, if my spirit body was, with some guy in, the pioneer days out toward the almost toward the Rocky Mountains. I remember it was kind of like golden prairie type grass or something. There was mountains. I was out chopping wood. And I remember I kind of stopped, and I remember thinking that I had a wife inside the cabin. Okay. There was a cabin off to my right. And I'm standing there. I knew what I was wearing. And so this was a very, very solid memory that I had had for many years. And so one day Jen and I were talking, we had went to this waterfall and sort of recharged our spiritual energy. These waterfalls are great for that because all that negative ions is actually uplifting. And so she had shared a memory of pioneer days where she was looking out the window at her husband chopping wood. And she had the exact image, the matching image, and that we discovered this. We're like, what the hell? It was insane. Like, we both shared a vision of a past life together, that we were husband and wife. But she was in the house looking at me, and I was actually looking out toward the mountains and feeling content. And like, that was the feeling I had, was like a content type feeling. It was a very short memory for me. But I remember everything intensely. I remember what I wore, and she described exactly what I was wearing. She described, and she was the woman in the cabin. It's the craziest thing. So to me, I feel like there's a bigger picture that we don't understand. I feel like that if, let's just say my theory is correct, and God is reusing spirit bodies to, again, connect our past and things like that, then there may be other things at play too, where, we are being connected on purpose. We're sort of being tagged and connected and put together in this life, for example. Now, the cosmos seemed to have lined. It was really weird how both of our lives just all of a sudden, and it's like, I think Stacey even said, like, the cosmos sort of cleared the path, and it was like, and now her and I was able to reunite, basically. So it's a very
hold on. But you got to set the scene here just a little bit, right? Because we went to this waterfall. We're really great. Everything's good. We get in the car. We start driving down the road. And we're talking about past lives. And I was like, I don't know. I don't know if I believe in past lives, but I have had this memory I've talked about a whole bunch. And actually, my mom's in here, and she heard the story a bunch of times, so she can attest to it. But, we talked about it a lot, and I was like, I just don't know if I buy it. I don't know where these memories came from. I don't know why they're so real. And I was like, I have this memory from the pioneer days, and it is literally the one and only time Josh has ever been like, shut the F up. Just shut the F up. I was looking at him like, bro, you don't know me. Don't talk to me like that. And he was like, never mind, continue. So you can imagine the next hour we're sitting there. Well, what about this? Like, what do you see in this? What does your memory show about that? What does it look like? What does the cabin look like? What do the mountains look like? What does the field look like? What am I wearing?
I'm trying to verify. Like, I'm trying to like verify that she really is seeing the things that I know I saw
Yeah.
vividly and
We
stuff.
we both were for like an hour. And the more we questioned it, the more exact it was, right? And so you can imagine now we're sitting here kind of shell shocked going, huh, does that explain why we feel like we've been married for 50 years and we have our routine, we have our understanding, we have our way of communicating just instantaneously? Like, is that why? Like, because now apparently we didn't finish some purpose in some other timeline and now we need to connect to finish that purpose? Or, what's the reason? And you can sit there and question it all day long, or you can just be like, hey, this is really freaking cool. And there's a reason for it. And I'm down for the ride, you know? So, but it does make you stop and think when you experience something personally like that. And everybody's got their theories on twin flames and soulmates and all that stuff. But, honestly, in my opinion, it's so much bigger than that with so much of a bigger purpose than that. And we'll never understand it in this lifetime, ever. So,
Well, I've got memories. Mine aren't as awesome or dramatic as that. Mine are all moments before my death on all my past lives. Now, granted, these events are usually the most traumatic type of deaths. Like, I could name all the different ways I've died. The most recent was, I know it was in the Civil War. I died during a battle. I was wearing the gray of the South, and I got shot. I was holding a musket, and I fell in a ditch puddle thing. It was really wet and slimy on the ground, and I fell flat on my back in the mud, and charging Union soldiers stepped on my chest as they were doing a charge to move forward, and then I died. The only real visual I got from that was the soldier and the tree. There was a big oak tree. It was in the middle of this battle, and everything was an open field. But where it was at, I have no idea. I have not come across. I mean, Gettysburg has that, but everybody says, "Well, I died at Gettysburg." I don't know. What I know is basically the information that I gave you. I've been hung, burned at the stake, shot, stabbed, pushed off a cliff. I mean, all of these different things are memories of the moment that I died, but I have no memory of the life that I lived, which is really awesome. You guys have that. To have memories of the life that you lived, or even memories of a skill that you had in a previous life. I mean, being able to play the piano like a savant out of the box, that would have been awesome. I don't have any of that. All I've got is, did you ever see the episode of Friends where Phoebe's talking about her past lives? She's a nurse in all of these different wars, and in every past life, she gets her arm blown off and it's just squirting from the socket. She's like, "Oh, not again." That's essentially what I've been going through. I have no idea what I did or any of that. I just have the memories of how I died. So,
Yeah. And, I do have the other one I know I had was another death, and it was, I can tell you it was a lake. It wasn't a big lake because you can kind of, I would say, it's decently sized, but still pretty small. Like, like a huge pond, maybe. I don't know. Like, anyways, there was a dirt road that went along the side of the lake, and then there's like a dirt turnaround, and that's, and like, you could tell that's the kind of place where people would go down at the end of and turn around the car, but also like party, But I know that I was driving a car, and I remember I was by myself, and I had to turn around, so I decided to try to do a donut to floor it and spin around to turn around. But instead, as I aimed toward the lake, the car started lunging forward toward the lake instead, as it kind of spun, and then, and so I ended up going right into the lake, and then the car started sinking pretty fast, and water was coming in. But the window was cracked, but like before I knew it, I was starting to float back, and this was all very vivid, all real time in my memory. And this I've had for a few times exactly, and I floated back, and I just couldn't get out, and I ended up drowning. And then like literally ran out of breath in real life, and woke up gasping. But it's the exact. I've had this dream like 3 times in my entire life, but they're all it's exact per detail. And so I feel like that may have been the actual life, because if I had to guess, the car probably would have been a car from maybe 50s or 60s, and so right before I was born in my next, this life. So this may have been the previous life to this one.
It's probably a Mustang. Mustangs are notorious for that sort of thing.
I don't think it was that cool. No, I feel like it was more of a family-ish kind of car, just a basic, family type of car. That's the feeling I got. I know it was like dark interior, but yeah, I mean that's kind of a memory that's the only couple memories I had, was the Pioneer memory and the car memory. Those were the two big ones that I've had. There was one other one that was sort of a medieval time frame. Medieval's a pretty big span though. But it was something to do with like a hut style. Like from what I can tell, the style of home is around that early medieval period, but that's kind of hazy. But that one I've had a few of that, and so I can get into that some other time, some other ones, but in any case. So guys, final thoughts on reincarnation? Anything else you want to throw in there?
Well, I've been as a pastor for 33 years now or so. I was trying to count it up the other day, kind of my stats, if you will. I don't know how many marriages, I can't figure it out, but I think I figured out close to about 63, 64 people that I've been in while they were dying. And as they died, I was there with them. Not all Christian, not all, some of them were Wiccan that I was with. And they just requested me to be there. And I can tell you that the death process is a very unique thing in those kinds of situations. A lot of the situations that I was in was hospice type care stuff, but there was a few times where I was on the side of the road with people, and through dangerous situations that I was involved in. And it's just, I think death is a sacred thing. It really is. And I just try to tell people, look, God is there, and He has a plan. And whether you're in Christianity or what, I just try to tell people there's a plan. You talking about memories? Y'all had some great stories, and what I'm about to say is not to try to knock any of that down or anything like that. I did have a situation where someone was having a lot of dreams, a lot of things coming to them about the past. And one of the things I found, especially we talked about a few weeks ago with the show about the seers and mediums. I found a lot of people that have some of those experiences. They're hearing things from the dead and they're thinking that's them when it's not them. And so I just kind of caution people, you really don't know where these things are coming from. Kind of like you said at the beginning of the show, you really don't know if there's a spirit kind of imprinting that. In the UFO movement, they talk about the imprinting of, they're seeing owls, but they're really little gray men, but they're projecting themselves as owls. Owls are not what they seem. But with all that said, great to hear your theory tonight. Great to hear your stories. It's a lot to think about.
Yeah. No, and it's really good input, and I think that's kind of a takeaway too. And I'm going to connect something too on that, Sean. But I think a takeaway is obviously just stay open minded. Stay open minded. No matter what you think, because Sean brings up a good point. Yeah, you never truly know. Maybe those memories we hold on to could have been just that, just the dead, the past, or who knows. I feel like, just as far as my little opinion on that, I would just say too, like, I think the longer you do things in life, the more experience you get. And I would never claim to know that I know the exact rules or truth, because that's what we talk about, right? But I do feel like sometimes you can at least know enough to kind of distinguish. Sometimes, again, I may be wrong, but there's some things that feel different than others, and that's why out of all my dreams, or all the things, that's why those particular ones I've always felt were different and unique based on everything, my experiences, how I felt. I can't even describe it, but those feelings potentially could have been different than anything else. But again, I'm always open for the fact that could they be from something else. I'm always there. But I do want to say one thing I think Sean brings up, and I think this could be a good episode for us to get into. If you guys in the chat, if you guys want to, I would like to do a whole episode on what happens when we die. All right. I think it would be
now.
Kind of, but we focused more on the reincarnation. But I want to talk about the theories of. I just want to get more into the weeds on that. And of course, like Sean obviously has experience of, some of us have been around people that have passed. And I want to also get into, because I do talk about this in my book, I talk about the two types of death, expected and unexpected. So I want to talk about that and what that may mean, or may not mean, or what that means to Sean or Jen or Stacy or whatever. So I think that could be a whole nother hour of discussion. We can still continue on about what happens when you die. But guys,
if we're going to be honest, everyone dies suddenly. You're alive, you're dead. So, I mean, it's all sudden, no matter what.
Well, I talk about expected and unexpected. So, okay, that's, and just to clarify, and I don't want to get into it too much, but expected is like those that are dying of like cancer, or like when you're going to die within a reasonable short period, like a reasonable enough time. That's when you're facing death and you have enough time to deal with it. That's expected. And even people.
So to back Stacy up here and maybe even sum it up for the evening, right? Expected death. We're all human. We're all going to die. We all know that. So live life to the fullest and learn everything you can and stay open-minded and treat each other well. That's it. Story of life. Be a good person.
On a big picture, we all know we're going to die.
Right. We're all going to die. So take every moment you got and use it for the best you can.
All right. So now that we're a fortune cookie, but anyways, I wanted to wrap up by saying that Sean, I think, is leading us into that topic of, so maybe we can look at next week talking about what happens when you die, and we can get into some of the discussions and different things, maybe even a little bit of science. I want to talk about the white light effect. So there are some things we can talk about this stuff, and what potentially is the white light and things like that. So we got some discussion we can talk about. But guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Those of you that watched, I appreciate you guys that popped in there. Everybody, it was good to see you all in the comments. Thank you for interacting. Guys, make sure you hit that like button. That really helps out. So I expect at least to see like 6 likes on there. At least. And share the videos with anybody you know that helps us out. Guys, we will see you next week.
Peace.